Early in 2021, Kamaru Usman was one of the most decorated UFC fighters of all time. He was absolutely tearing through everybody in the welterweight division, decapitating Jorge Masvidal in their second fight and cementing himself as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world at that point. And Jan BLACHOWICZ, just a month beforehand, he was just coming off his first title defense against Kamaru Usman's countryman and close friend Israel Adesanya, who was looking unbeatable himself in the middleweight division, and stopped Israel Adesanya from being the 5th ever double champion with a great technical performance. So it's more than safe to say both of these guys were at the peak of their careers at this point in time. And then the call out from Usman to leapfrog middleweight and face Jan BLACHOWICZ for the light heavyweight title happened. But unfortunately, the fight never materialized, and BLACHOWICZ was dethroned by Glover Teixeira at UFC 267 later that year. And the last nail in the coffin for this fight to ever come to fruition came just after Usman and Jan faced off backstage at UFC 276, where Kamaru Usman got folded like a lawn chair by Leon Edwards at UFC 278, leaving both fighters without the title. And now, unfortunately, Usman has confirmed on the Pound for Pound podcast that he's on with Henry Cejudo that the fight would make absolutely no sense, as they both wouldn't have much to gain from it.
Listen, I respect each and every UFC fighter that steps in there, in that octagon. And even with Jan BLACHOWICZ, I respect him, the original Polish power. Big respect for Jan BLACHOWICZ. But I thought that matchup favored me, and I wanted that matchup when Jan BLACHOWICZ was the champion. And I was the champion. I am no longer the champion. He's no longer the champion. So that fight makes absolutely no sense. It does nothing for me. If I go up there and I beat Jan BLACHOWICZ, what does that do for me? Nothing. It's just another paycheck. So, Jan, big respect. You're a big, strong, tough guy. I will happily decline at this moment.
But let's rewind to the point in time where both of these guys were at the absolute top of their game at the later half of 2021 and see if the Polish power would have been too much for Usman, or if Usman would have made history becoming the first double champ to win in 2 weight classes above. Looking at Jan, in this time period, he was on a 5-fight win streak, which involved making sure that Luke Rockhold never even sniffed a light heavyweight fight again. Then he KO'd Corey Anderson, who was on a 4-fight win streak, and he also kicked off Dom Reyes' brutal KO loss streak down the division. And of course, as I said before, being able to beat Israel Adesanya at his peak, with Izzy just coming off the best performance of his career at that point in time, where he completely embarrassed Paulo Costa, who's never looked the same since. Throughout this run, Jan was showing some of the most composed and dominant performances that at the top of the light heavyweight division that it had basically ever seen since John Jones had took out Alexander Gustafsson in their fight 3 years beforehand. And when we look at Kamaru Usman, I mean, he was on the top of the world at this point. He was running through absolutely everyone, carrying a ridiculous 19-fight win streak, with 15 of those wins being in the UFC. He took out a 6-fight win streak Tyron Woodley, who was looking borderline unbeatable until Usman came along. Then he took out Colby Covington in one of, if not the best fight in welterweight history, in my opinion, breaking Colby Covington's jaw in the 5th round for the finish. And then he faces some adversity against Gilbert Burns in their first round of their title fight, but then he just goes and cleans him up in the 3rd round with ground and pound. And then, as I said, he goes and decapitates Jorge Masvidal 2 months later. Both Jan and Usman were at their peak forms, and it does make this matchup extremely hard to actually pull a final result from. But we'll start off with the 2 main differences between the 2 of them, being their ages, and of course for Usman, the weight difference. In this time period, having them set up to fight in 2021 that we're going to be looking at, Jan BLACHOWICZ was 38 years old and Kamaru Usman was 34 years old. Now, of course, this draws into Usman's favor. I do think that between 30 and 34, there's a lot of evidence to back up that between 30 and 34 is your peak age range for MMA. But with the fighting style of Jan, I don't think that it is too much of a detriment to him. This is mainly because Jan doesn't rely on explosive movements with his style. He's one of the most composed fighters in the light heavyweight division, even to this day, in my opinion. He utilizes his reach very well, especially to pop the 1-2s, which we got to see against Israel Adesanya. But the two biggest aspects of his game, aside from his KO power and that reach, is his tight striking defense. He protects himself very well in striking exchanges. Not even Adesanya or Alex Pereira were able to find a clear opening against him to finish him. And they are two of the best pinpoint accurate advanced strikers in the UFC and that the UFC has ever seen. I mean, Jan holds a strike absorption rate of under 3 strikes per minute, and 2, his leg kicks and his checks. He was doing a very good job against Izzy when it came to defending those leg kicks earlier on, especially when he was throwing them back. He landed almost 80% of his leg kicks in that fight, and not to mention against Alexander Rakic, where he just chewed up the lead leg of his, and then obviously we saw what happened to Alexander Rakic. He got injured straight after that, and it was his ACL. So there could have been something to do with Jan's leg kicks in that fight as to why that fight got stopped. And this especially is a huge issue when it comes to the leg kicks. It is a huge issue for Usman, and it could honestly be a deciding factor in Jan's favor for this fight, because Usman's knees are absolutely terrible. They're shot. His frame is very top heavy, and Usman has spoken out about ongoing issues with them having to have multiple knee surgeries throughout his career. However, he hasn't faced opponents that really attempt to target his legs because of his exceptional wrestling pedigree. And, that threat of the takedown there being there on one leg, and then Usman just being able to shoot for that single and take him straight down. But Usman hasn't faced a fighter with the size, strength, and KO power that Jan has when shooting for a takedown. So I do think that the KO on the counter is definitely there for Jan to take. But that being said, though, I think Usman is a lot more skilled on the feet than people actually give him credit for. And honestly, I think he is actually he's as technically sound as Blachowicz, or probably even slightly more technical. And that comes down to his footwork. Usman's boxing has improved leaps and bounds since entering the UFC in 2015. He's clearly got the power there, and he switches stances very well to cover distance when he strikes. So I honestly think he could do some decent damage to Jan on the feet. But Usman's key to victory in this fight is completely plain and simple. He just has to grind Blachowicz out to a decision, and that's where we need to seriously talk about the weight difference between them and the variables it brings into this fight. I'm a big believer in when there is a weight difference involved, you always have to look at the chin, the cardio, and the speed. Now for Jan, he comes into his fights weighing around 220 pounds, and they are fighting at his natural weight class, so there isn't much to attribute to him out of those. But when we look at Usman, this is a crucial factor for him, and I'm gonna start off with the cardio aspect. Usman's gas tank is honestly one of the best in the entirety of MMA for his weight class. Him and Colby Covington, pound for pound, over all divisions, pretty much blow most fighters out of the water when it comes to their cardio. And I honestly don't think it will be that big of an issue in this fight for Usman, even though he's moving up 2 weight classes. When you look at Usman and his weight, he walks around at about 200 pounds. And when making weight and rehydrating, he probably sits at around 190 to 200 pounds. We can look at his fight against Khamzat Chimaev, which he took on less than 2 weeks notice and moved up to 185. He looked amazing on the cardio front of things, and he could have gone 5 rounds in that fight 100%. And if it did go 5 rounds, he would have taken that win as well. Now, understandably, light heavyweight is 20 pounds heavier than middleweight, which is approximately about 10 kilos. But you take Usman in the Salt Lake City fight with Leon Edwards, before he got decapitated, he was the only one on that whole entire card that did not get gassed. So honestly, if anything in this fight with them that might start, he might start waning possibly in the 5th round, if that, but I think that's a stretch. Even putting that weight on, I don't really see his cardio being an issue here. And you attribute that to his base. I mean, he's a collegiate wrestler. He's got the collegiate wrestling background and that aggressive takedown grinders kind of style. So I think ultimately, he would be almost completely fine when it comes to this matchup in terms of stamina. But that aside, his chin and speed is where I think he is going to have some issues. Usman, he has great footwork, and as I said, he's great offensively on the feet, but his head is there to be hit. He doesn't have the best head movement, and honestly, he has a huge head, so it's kind of a hard target to miss. And Usman, when you look at his past fights in welterweight, he's been wobbled by Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington in both of their fights, and Leon Edwards in their 3rd fight, and that's due to that lack of head movement. The straight shots that they were landing were very effective against him, and any clinch-based work was good against him too, especially when Leon wobbled him in the 3rd fight with a clinch knee. And Blachowicz has got a 2-inch reach advantage with a 78-inch reach compared to Usman's 76-inch reach, which can give Jan the edge with those straight shots. But I think Usman can even it out on the feet when it comes to that footwork and his distance coverage. Also with Jan, I haven't seen a whole lot of clinch work from him, but with that power that he has, with that Polish power, I would favor him in that position. And lastly, the speed. The speed of Jan isn't great, but neither is Usman's really, to be honest. I think the footwork and that distance coverage really makes up for it, but they are both very technically sound when it comes to their striking, and I think that the added weight will be fine for Usman, but I think his natural speed will drop a bit, and I think ultimately if either of these guys are getting a KO finish, I'm siding with Jan on this one. And I think that's really down to Usman's speed translation going up 20 pounds, and the head movement are definitely those concerning factors. And Jan is just very durable. I think Jan would be more durable than Usman. And I mean, when you look at him, he's taken big shots against a lot of heavier fighters in his own division. And he's only been knocked out twice in his whole entire career, or taken out twice in his whole entire career when it comes to the KO TKOs. So yeah, when it comes to the feet and when it comes to that KO threat overall, definitely siding with Jan. Now, when it comes to the ground game, I'm definitely giving it Usman the advantage here, weight difference or not. He is just absolutely relentless with his ground pressure, and he needs to get the fight to the ground as quickly as possible. If he can get Jan on his back and lay down ground and pound, then that is 100% his most clear path to victory. But I will say Jan's takedown defense isn't the worst, and I think he will make Usman work hard for the takedowns, but I do think Usman will find success with the takedowns early in an attempt to drain Jan's gas tank. And offensively, when it comes to the wrestling, Jan is completely outmatched. That's probably the most clear part of this matchup for sure. Usman just 100% takes that. But when we look at the submission threat, it's really down to Jan's offense versus Usman's defense. Jan at this point in time, he was 9-1 when it came to his submissions, but I don't see him getting into a favorable position to really find that finish in the fight against Usman with an actual submission threat. And Usman is definitely defensively sound enough, and I think he's definitely sound enough to make sure that finish doesn't happen in that way. So I don't see this ultimately ending in a submission from either of them, to be honest. And I think Usman will be able to find success with the takedowns early and grind the rounds away from Jan. And I think the desperation and frustration from Jan would start to set in. And there are two main crucial issues I see with Jan going into this fight against a wrestler of Usman's caliber. And that is that he overreacts to takedown attempts, and he tends to lose his balance and get taken down anyway when that threat is there, which, if you look back, is exactly what happened in his fights with Glover, when Glover got that second takedown and he lost the belt, and in the 5th round against Ankalaev in their title fight.
Jan BLACHOWICZ, not ideal way to get here, but
And along with that, the get-ups. Jan isn't bad at stuffing takedowns against the average takedown threat opposition, which Usman isn't. He's at the highest level, and when he's on the ground, when Jan's on the ground, he struggles hard to make it back to his feet and often either rides out the round or he settles in his guard. Now, that being said, if this fight stays on the feet, I'm saying it now, I think Usman is getting knocked out around the third round. With that power and that reach difference, along with the composure and the lack of head movement from Usman, I think Jan could finish him, but I would put my money on Usman being able to work his ground game and drag out the 38-year-old's gas tank to the point where that threat isn't there on the feet to the point where Jan could actually finish Usman. But I don't think Usman will get the positioning right to the point to ground and pound Jan out, especially when you look at Jan and his durability and his ability to recapture his guard and stay safe while he's on his back. But ultimately, with that being said, I am taking Usman by a 49-46 unanimous decision here. I think Jan will have a round in there to land some good shots in the third. I think it'll be the third round and steal the round. I think he'll be able to steal that one just on damage, but I think Usman will readjust and make sure the fight doesn't play out on the feet. I say the third round because I think that Usman will start gaining some confidence in terms of, okay, I'm working him on the ground. Now let me just try and mix it up and fight him on the feet, mix it up a bit. But then that's when I think he'll find out it's like, okay, I can't deal with Jan's power on the feet. So I think he'll have to readjust to make sure it doesn't play out on the feet, and then obviously just take it to the ground and keep it there as much as he possibly can. And with that, I truly believe that Jan Blachowicz could get the KO in the third round if Usman does not keep it on the ground. If Usman stays on the feet, I'm feeling a third round KO, but I think that Usman will adjust that game plan, and I think that he will take that 49-46 decision. If you enjoyed this Mythical Matchups video, feel free to check out my video on Jon Jones versus Dan Henderson. If their fight at UFC 151 was never cancelled, just got it up here on the screen. And with that, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.